Hello and welcome to Awaz News. I'm Simone Cotoni and I'll be taking you through big news across Canada. U.S. Central Bank hikes interest rate by biggest amount since 1994. NATO meets again as Russian ultimatum passes for Ukraine to surrender besieged cities. Border mayors call on federal government to scrap the ArriveCan app. Doug Ford to announce new cabinet by the end of the month. Wealthsimple to lay off 13% of staff amid market volatility. Anti-money laundering inquiry calls for sweeping changes to tackle dirty money in British Columbia. We do not accept your apology. Activist brings Toronto Police Conference on race-based use of force data to stand still. Suspension of the vaccine mandate for domestic travelers, transportation worker, and federal employees. Winter Olympics may not include Nordic combined for first time. So those were the headlines. Now let's jump right into the details. The Federal Reserve has raised its benchmark interest rate by 75 basis points to a range of up to 1.75%, its most aggressive hike in almost 27 years, as the U.S. Central Bank scrambles to rein in the runaway inflation. The bank's rate, known as the federal funds rate, impacts the rates that borrowers and savers get from the bank, most notably variable rate mortgages. The bank has been expected to raise its rate by half a percentage point, but those expectations were ratcheted up in recent days as the data showed the U.S. inflation rate has yet to peak, touching the 8.6% in year up to May. Ukraine ignored a Russian ultimatum to surrender the eastern city of Severodonetsk as NATO defense ministers gathered in the Brussels to discuss sending more heavy weapons to replenish Lviv's dwindling stocks. Russia has told Ukrainian forces hold up in chemical plant in the shattered city to stop senseless resistance and lay down arms from today morning, pressing its advantage in the battle for control of the eastern Ukraine. Plans announced by the Moscow to open a humanitarian corridor for civilians stuck in the plant were disrupted by the Ukrainian shelling. Russian-backed separatists were quoted by RIA news agency as saying, "The separatists have planned to take the civilian to the territory under their own control." Ukrainian says more than 500 civilians are trapped alongside soldiers inside the Azot chemical factory, where its forces have resisted weeks of Russian bombardment that has reduced much of the Severodonetsk to ruins. A group of mayors and businesses in the communities along the Canada-US border is calling on the federal government to end the ArriveCan app, saying it's discouraging Americans from visiting and shopping in Canada. Sarnia Mayor Mike Bradley said the app has been a disaster and is no longer needed. Niagara Falls Mayor Jim Diodati said his community depends on tourism and the 10 million people who used to cross the border each year prior to the pandemic. Ontario Premier Doug Ford will soon handpick a new cabinet to help steer his agenda at the outset of his second term, with an announcement coming in the next 2 weeks. Formal discussion about the cabinet picks have not yet taken place. The initial focus following the Progressive Conservative election victory on June 2nd has been policy and establishing the marching orders the eventual ministers will get. Once those mandates are clear, then the process begins with the putting faces to the files. The policy work is now largely complete and the Premier just has to sign off before selecting the cabinet. A process could happen fairly quickly, the source said.
That you wake up every day ready to fight for what you believe in. You have the courage and of your convictions. And to Stephen, you've dedicated your life to public service, and while we may not have agreed on everything, I know you want nothing but the best for Ontario's future. Friends, we've come so far in the last 4 years together, but there's still much work to do. This campaign, I ask you to put your trust in me to get the job done. I will never, ever take your trust for granted. It's time to keep building for seniors and young families, for drivers and transit riders, for workers looking for a better job and a check. It's time to keep building for you. Together, let's get it done. Thank you, and God bless the people of Ontario. Thank you.
Wealthsimple is laying off 13% of its workforce as the financial services company joins the slew of global technology businesses facing the market volatility. In a letter sent to the staff, the Toronto-based businesses, the chief executive Michael Katchen said 159 of the 1,262 people who work for Wealthsimple will depart the company through the move. He positioned the cuts as a part of the fallout from the month of seeing the market soar and Wealthsimple grow at an underrepresented rate amid the COVID-19 pandemic. The company's valuation hit $5 billion and it's raised to $750 million from a star-studded list of investors, including the rapper Drake and actor Ryan Reynolds and Michael J. Fox, as money poured into the tech sector during the health crisis. The Commissioner of British Columbia's public inquiry into money laundering said the federal anti-money laundering regime is not effective and the province needs to go its own way if it hopes to tackle the problem of the dirty money washing through its economy. In a final report released today, the Supreme Court Justice Austin Quillen said the province needs to establish a dedicated provincial money laundering intelligence and investigation unit and appoint a commissioner to oversee the government's approach to the problem. Speaking to the reporters after his report's release, Quillen said the public was right to be suspicious about the lack of response to what appeared to be a huge amount of dirty money flowing into the BC. Quillen said the agency tasked by the federal government to identify money laundering threat, the Financial Transaction and Report Analysis Center, is ineffective and that BC needs to strike out on its own to make progress. I'm here to address what I see as really egregious in terms of this particular public relations stunt that has been delivered by our chief here. Beverly Bain, a professor at the University of Toronto and a member of No Pride in Policing Coalition, told a room full of reporters and Toronto Police top brass today. Bain's comments were directed at the Toronto Police Chief James Raymer, who just moments earlier delivered an apology following the release of the survey's newly released data on the race-based use of force in the city. You were apologizing for a series of information that we have not been saying to you for decades, Bain said in the more than 5-minute long address. Government announced today that as of June 20th, it will suspend the vaccination requirement for domestic and outbound travel, federally regulated transportation sector, and federal government employees. While the suspension of the vaccine mandate reflects on improved public health situation in Canada, the COVID-19 virus continues to evolve and circulate in Canada and globally. Given this context, and because vaccination rates and the virus control in the other countries vary significantly, current vaccination requirement at the border will remain in effect. This will reduce the potential impact of international travel on our healthcare system and serve as added protection against any future variant. Nordic Combine, which uniquely tests skiers on jaw-dropping jumps and heart-pounding trails, has been a part of Winter Olympics since 1924. Its time might be up. It's the only Olympic sport without women, and the International Olympic Committee is due to make decision later this month about whether to allow women to compete in Nordic Combine at the 2026 Milan Cortina and Panzo Games. There is the possibility, however, the Nordic Combine is dropped entirely from the Olympic, according to the athlete and advocates. Thank you for tuning in. I'm Simone Cutoni, and I'll see you tomorrow, same time, same channel. Adios.